Their methodology is cooked so they can get a result that they can publish to discourage Republicans from voting on Election Day. Go home. Don't worry. Tell a friend. You're going to lose. It doesn't matter. There's a blue wave. It's over. It's embarrassing. It's done. Stay home. Don't do anything. This is a coordinated effort by the media to make you and your friends that want to support this tremendous economy that we have to stay home and let the Democrats win. That's why they have fake polls along with the fake news. Joining us now to break all this down, he's been barnstorming the country, is Steve Bannon. He was the campaign chairman. Well, he's been a lot of things, so let's just run through them all. Chairman of Breitbart News, President CEO. Then he was the campaign chairman for the winning, stunning Trump general election campaign in 2016. Then he was a chief strategist in the White House for the president. And now he is the head of a C4 operation called Citizens for the American Republic. And he's also come out with a new movie called Trump at War. You can check it out. Just go to @TrumpAtWar, Twitter, or TrumpAtWar.com. Steve Bannon. Steve, you were just in Virginia. You've been all over the place. Great to be here, man.
Thank you. The reason I wanted to do the show today, John, and thank you so much, because you reached the entire Commonwealth. Look, the Commonwealth of Virginia, once again, this is going to be the railhead of a Trump victory, right? It's going to start early on Tuesday night, right after 7 o'clock when the polls close, and the tempo in Virginia, particularly in Comstock, in Bratt, and in Taylor's district, will be looked at of where this is going to go or not, and that's why it's incumbent upon everybody, I think, in your listening audience that supports the Trump program to get out. Tomorrow's game day, and it's all come down to game day now. Who gets out? And I agree with you. Throughout the country, I can tell you, as I've gone to these, and I'd recommend going to Real Clear Politics and see Sean Trendy, who Sean used to be a partner at Hutton and Williams. He's a great analyst of polling data. He lays out how we hold the House by 2 seats, which I think is the most probable outcome. And I can tell you, as I've gone around to these districts throughout the country, I'm getting feedback 24 hours a day from everybody. You're absolutely correct. People feel that this thing is starting to break our way as people feel the momentum and feel the intensity. I will say, however, from my experience in the Commonwealth of Virginia on Saturday, we have to be aware of one thing, is that the progressive left, and I've said this for months and months and months, they've been out hustling, they've been working, they've got this Tea Party energy of 2010. This weekend in Virginia, there was a massive ground game that came out. Now, it was a paid ground game, but they had volunteers and paid people from all over the Mid-Atlantic states coming into these districts, and that was the same throughout the country. So people have to understand that the Netroots Nations crowd, the resistance, the Time's Up movement, this kind of Tom Steyer next generation, they have taken over the ground game from the Democratic Party. They think the Democratic Party is too incompetent, and they have run a ground game, and it's impressive. And so it's very simple. It's going to come down tomorrow, John, to one very basic thing. This is Trump's first reelect. It's going to be the Trump deplorable base versus this kind of progressive left, ground game in effort. And we're going to see who wins. But if the Trump voter shows up, I think you're going to hold these House seats, and I think we're going to have very good outcomes. And if Trump voters don't show up en masse, then it'll be a very different outcome.
Well, I think they are, and I think based on, like you just said, that survey in Real Clear Politics and the campaigns I know that both of us have talked to, the Trump voters, a lot of them have come out early, which was shocking. I mean, we've got early voting. It's setting records all over the place. And, of course, all the Democrats are saying, that means we're going to win big. Steve, let's go back 2 years, almost to the day. I was in Trump Tower, as you know. I was there for, 3 days doing my show. You were there. Isn't this like almost, Steve, isn't it like deja vu all over again? I mean, I was telling my audience earlier today, I remember on Monday, the same thing. I got off the air at 10 a.m., and I went in I guess we were on the 10th floor, whatever floor we were on, where the war room was.
It was labeled the 14th, but in actuality, it might have been the 7th.
Yeah,
that's a different
wherever we were, right?
Numbering goes. So you were right there near the war room. So
yeah, and so I go in.
I believe you're the only person we allowed to do a live national broadcast from actually inside the campaign.
The only one in America. I was the only one there, right. And so I go in. I
John,
get off the.
You were actually a true believer, because the polls, the opposition party media polls, as you know, did not look that great.
No, they didn't. And I remember going in, and after I got off the air, and it was on Monday because I was there since Friday. I went in on Monday, and there was a bunch of never Trumpers there that Sean Spicer brought in and Reince Priebus brought in that had kind of infested the place. And they were all telling me, you know what, we're going to lose. I mean, this thing is going to be so bad. All the early voting is in. Charlotte's breaking numbers. We're going to lose North Carolina. And I can even tell you who they are. We're going to lose North Carolina. We're getting hammered in Nevada. Mail it in. That's done. Early voting in Florida is way up in Miami and Dade. That's done. I mean, we're going to get this was our own people from the RNC telling me
By
this.
the way, this was my team.
This was your
my
team.
team. I mean, that was the RNC guys. You're absolutely correct.
It was
It was not bad memories, by the way.
I know it was not the Trump team or the Bannon team, and it was not Kellyanne, your campaign manager. It was the RNC people that Spicer and Priebus shipped in there, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like deja vu. I'm hearing the same things now, and it didn't quite turn out that way. But what about the fact that early voting is up in all these Republican areas like you've never seen? What about that? What does
I think
that
early
mean?
voting, I think the way the early voting is breaking, and I think, look, to RNC's credit, they have put in the lesson from 2016 is to put money into early voting and to put money in ground game. I'm not so sure. We'll have to see whether the ground game was up to the others. Look, here's the thing, is that this all hangs in the balance. It's very simple. If you turn it, that's why I went to Culpeper the other day. If you get your friends out, everybody that listens to the John Frederick Show, it's very simple. If you get yourself, your friends, your network, the force multiplier of you as an individual is much more powerful than you think, your personal network. And this is going to come down on Tuesday night, tomorrow night, I think, to a half a dozen districts and a couple of hundred votes on each side. I mean, I think that's how close it is in some of these districts. And this is going to be muscle versus muscle. And we're going to see if their ground game's better and their people are more motivated. Now, I happen to think when you look at the math and you go around and see the intensity that the deplorables now have, I think we've got the momentum. Now, it just has to all come together on game day tomorrow. So that's why, nobody, you can't be binge watching Netflix today, right? I know it's bad weather in the Commonwealth. It's atrocious weather up here in Washington. But it's, today's a day you got to get on with it, and you ought to spend your entire day contacting everybody you know and making sure that they get out and vote.
Steve Bannon, let me just ask you this. You grew up in Richmond. When you look at the 7th District and the Spanberger-Bratt race, this is so critical. Spanberger spent and raised $10 million there. You were in Culpeper over the weekend. I couldn't make it. I was out with my older son. What does Dave need to do today and tomorrow in order to win that race?
I think Dave's doing what he should do. He should just continue to engage. Look, it's one of the things is the scale of the money that's come in. And look, I'm a no tears, no wine guy. If they raise the money and they got the ground game, they got the money and they got the ground game. I think it's incumbent. And by the way, the amount of resources that have gone into here have been absolutely mind-boggling. But Dave Bratt is symbolic, and they know that. That's what this race in Virginia 7 is so important, because Dave Bratt was really one of the opening volleys in this whole Civil War in the Republican Party that brought up this kind of grassroots populist nationalist effort, right? This true conservative effort. Bratt over Cantor many years ago. I think it was in 2014 in June in that primary. That was one of the opening volleys, and people forget that Donald J. Trump was tweeting out about Bratt, 24 hours, 48 hours before he won. So it's very symbolic. I think, Bratt, he just got to engage and just continue to grind it out and doing things like he's doing, going to call centers and getting people out. I'm sure they have a very good feel for the district. You just got to get people out. Now, I think people in the district will tell you over the weekend, there's a very organized effort by the opposition to canvass and to get people out. And, some of that's paid and some of it's volunteers, and they had people around from the Mid-Atlantic states. I have no problem with that. That's what you're supposed to do. But I think here in Virginia 7, that's one I think they're going to very much focus. I think coming out of the box on tomorrow night, the major national networks are going to focus on Comstock and Bratt as two emblematic districts about what this blue wave is or is not and what the intensity level is. And I keep telling people, and this is what I told people in Culpeper the other day, remember, there's 3, 4, 5 hours of voting. Now they're talking about Alaska. That seat may be in play. There's many hours of voting out west. And I've spent a lot of my time, probably half my time, out in New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, The state of Washington is in play. The California districts, these 5 seats up there are all in play. That's all got hours and hours and hours of after-work voting, which is very important out west. And so that's why the Bratt and Comstock races in Taylor are very important, because they're going to be the first ones after Kentucky 6. We'll just start about 6 o'clock. From 7 o'clock on, in that hour, they'll be very focused, I think, on Bratt, Comstock, and Taylor.
Tell us about Kentucky 6th. I know you've followed that. Just give our audience, Steve, for those that are not familiar with it, what the stakes are.
Kentucky's voting closes early, closes at 6 p.m. The Commonwealth closes at 7. Those are both actually quite early, given some of the western states, I think, are open to 8 or 9 sometimes. In Kentucky 6 is in the eastern part of the state. It's a guy bar running. It's a very highly contested. I think if you look at the numbers, people feel a little more comfortable there than they felt a couple of weeks ago. I believe the president's gone there once, and I think the VP's gone there a couple of times. It's been one that's gotten a lot of attention. Rand Paul, McConnell are both obviously very, very focused on that, being the 2 senators from Kentucky. And it's a seat that was looked at as a potential in play. And and they're going to have an entire hour starting at 6 o'clock to focus on it. So it's going to get a lot of scrutiny. And I think you'll be able to see. I think that's another one that people will be able to see what this trend looks like. I think you'll be able to ascertain, I believe, the intensity of this blue wave because they're going to focus on the suburbs. They're going to focus on the Northern Virginia suburbs that Comstock's fighting in. They're going to focus on the suburbs of Chesterfield and Henrico County and down there in the Virginia Beach area to see what the intensity level is of this kind of anti-Trump vote. And they'll be picking through this in great detail. That's why the Commonwealth, once again, is going to be, something that people are very, very, very focused on. I was, during the 16, being a Virginian, during 16, I was actually not as enthusiastic about focusing on the Commonwealth within the candidate. He was all in. I thought we had better shot of resources deployed to Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. And he actually was very gung-ho in Minnesota. And I think if we had followed the candidates lead the time we would have won Minnesota, he wanted to spend more time. But I think that it's much, much, much more competitive right now in Virginia for the Trump program than it was in 16. And I think that's part of it because the economy's doing so well. So we'll just have to see. But I think it's very simple. The deplorables turn out, it's going to be a good night. Deplorables don't turn out, it's going to be a long night. And so let's have a good night instead of a long night.
I would like to have a good night. We're with Steve Bannon. He is now the president and CEO of Citizens for the American Republic. That is a C4 organization. He's been barnstorming the United States to try to get Trump voters out. He's got a new movie, must see, Trump at War. You can go to trumpatwar.com. You can see the trailer, then the whole film. And as you know, he was the chairman of Breitbart News, chairman of the Trump campaign in 2006. He made me chairman of Virginia, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Steve. So look at this now for our listeners. This is fascinating. So 6 o'clock, Kentucky 6, we're going to get insight right there as to what is happening. Those polls close at 6 o'clock. Then at 7 o'clock, and we're going to be in D.C. tomorrow. So at 7 p.m., we got 3 races, Virginia 10, Virginia 7, and Virginia 2, which is Hampton Roads, 7, Dave Bratt, 10, Comstock, Northern Virginia. So those 4 races, by 7:30, 8 o'clock, we're going to get a feel of, is there a blue wave? Have the Trump supporters come out? Right? And you told me last evening.
And the intensity is what this is, this perception they're trying to drive of college-educated women, Republican women, independent women in these suburbs of Richmond, down in the Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach area, and in Northern Virginia. I think that's something we'll be going through. We'll be able to ascertain, I think, a lot of how this plays out throughout the night, and particularly a district like Bratt's, which has got the western part of the district. It's a heavy in the rural, and up in Culpeper, it's a very, very heavy. That is real Trump country, and that's why I was up there over the weekend to say, hey, it's very simple. 100% of the Trump voters got to show up. You can't have nobody can be leaning on a shovel. You lean on a shovel, we're not going to win because they've got a turnout machine, and they've outspent this guy, and they're outspending him on TV to support the Trump program. Right, these congressmen are proxy votes, and so that's why. And throughout, one of the things about Brad, he has supported the Trump program throughout the rest of the country, or some of it. The districts we've been focusing on is where what I would call rhinos, in certain, as you know, maybe people that have not been totally with the Trump program the entire time. People think they're more establishment, which our message there is that, hey, this is about the Trump program. His first reelect. This is a referendum on him. It doesn't make a difference who the congressman is. It's a vote for Trump, and so that's a little tougher argument to make than in the Brad situation, where it's pretty clear. Dave Brad supported the president's agenda, but it's going to come down. It's going to come down. I think it's all a model now.
Well, you told me last night, you said that if Dave Brad wins and Scott Taylor wins, you said the Republicans are going to hold the House by 2. Do you still share that view?
Yeah, I think for the people in the Commonwealth, if these seats turn our way, because I think in saying that, I think it will speak largely to some of the dynamics we're seeing throughout the rest of the country, particularly in Virginia 2, in Virginia 7 in the Brett district. I believe that if you hold Virginia and you hold these seats, I think you've got to. There's a very reasoned case of that narrow gate. I've been talking about this narrow gate now for about 4 weeks. It's not given that this race was not nationalized till a couple of months ago, given that everybody needs to start pulling in the same direction, given that the Kavanaugh hearings were clearly an accelerant to kind of drive this. We had momentum, and there was a very narrow gate because these were long odds in the House. Remember, when I talked to Stivers back in September of 17, I think I said on your show last week, they were at that time thinking it could be 80 to 100 seats in play, right? It could be like a reverse Tea Party year of 2010. That has now been narrowed down, that this thing's a real dogfight on 25 seats, and that's not netting out the ones that are in play. In fact, New Hampshire last night, John, one we've been very focused on, I think it's New Hampshire 2, is now looks like it may be a pickup. That thing is really narrowing, and the Democrats are starting to throw money into it. So I think there's 5 or 6 seats they never focused on that much that we can actually flip, which it may come down. That may net out. My theory is that we pick up 2, 3, 4 of those seats, and we can net out to less than the 23 they need to take the House. My point is this is going to be, I think, as close as it can possibly get, a couple of hundred votes on each side. But Virginia, starting at 7 o'clock, the national and really the international media will be very focused on these House races in the Commonwealth.
Steve Bannon, you mentioned New Hampshire, too. Was that Steve Negron?
Yeah, I think the congressman is this African-American, young African-American guy that's running. He's put on a heck of a race. He's kind of come out of nowhere with not a lot of money, and it's very tight. In fact, I think the White House is actually sending up some personnel today to actually campaign. This is the one that was the woman that won and then retired.
Right, that's right.
This is one we've been kind of tracking as an outside thing, and I think it's tightened over the last 72 hours. People should understand. I think Arizona shows this. It looks like it could be a move of people coming home, of independent voters starting to shift, and maybe even some, the Republican college-educated women at the end of the day maybe voting their pocketbooks, maybe voting economics. I think you're seeing this kind of trend out in Arizona. We'll have to see. It's a little too early to tell right now, but a lot of these races are tightening up. The Hill this morning, the newspaper, had a new poll that's come out that said the generic ballot has gone from 8 to 3 in the last week, with more undecideds out there. So this whole thing is tightening. The next 24, 40, 30 hours are going to be vitally important. So here's a great thing about American democracy. It's all in play. History has not been written yet. It'll be written tomorrow when people actually show up. And I think that's the great thing about what's happening right now. People are engaged in politics as we've ever seen. People say it's divided. I actually say in an odd way it's kind of united, because now everybody, it's not movies anymore. It's not really sports. It's not really books. It's really what gets people engaged is engagement in politics. And I agree that there are 2 different philosophies about what the direction a country could go. That's happened in America before. That's not the worst thing in the world, where you have an engaged citizenship. Like I thought this weekend in the Commonwealth, when I was down there in the 7th, John, for these events I went to, I thought it was terrific that the other side was out there doing this. That's what democracy is about. It's about getting out there. It's about getting engaged. I think at the end of the day, it's about knocking on doors and canvassing neighborhoods. So I think that this thing shows we've got a very robust and vibrant democracy where people and average citizens are engaged in the most intense level.
Stephen K. Bannon, we're out of time. I got to get you on Wednesday
brother.
to break all this down. I want to thank you so much. Great analysis, Stephen Bannon, Citizens for the American Republic. That's a C4. He's got that going. See the movie Trump at War. Go to trumpatwar.com. Follow him on Twitter at Stephen K. Bannon. Stephen, thanks for being with us. Great analysis, man. Thank you. We will talk soon.